read a section out of a book called This Ridge Called My Back. The section is, and when you read, take your pictures with you. And what we all got from this, I think, was that it addresses white racism within the feminist movement, and like specifically addressing kind of white feminism. So, what did you guys think that like white feminism meant?
Well, white feminism basically only focused on the white woman's struggles and not really on the woman of color struggles and the privileges white women have and then the women of color still don't have. That was basically my definition of white feminism.
Yeah, I think it's really exclusive of women of color in every aspect, in panels, scholarship, day-to-day, outlook.
Social interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And white feminism is just kind of inherently racist, and Dara explores that, and she kind of explores how white women are still perceive women of color as like this other category. And even when they're sitting in conference with women of color, they kind of don't take into consideration any of their ideas. And Doris kind of explores how, in the presence of white women, Black women specifically, and other women of color tend to like suppress any type of emotion or opinions that they have, just because they feel like they're gonna get shut down. And then there's also like this underclass myth that Christos explores in the I Don't Understand Those Who Have Turned Away From Me. That Black people specifically and other people of color are kind of perpetuated in the stereotype where they are afforded the same opportunities as white people and they choose to live as like the underclass and they choose to be poor, and by their poor choices they're kind of stuck.
Right, but it's not a choice for them. And and then when given the opportunity to speak at like a panel or be in scholarship, it's very underrated. And I think women of color are seen as tokens within scholarship, within panels. Audre Lorde specifically talks about how she identifies as a Black lesbian feminist, and when she was asked to speak at a panel, she was the only person that was Black, that was lesbian, that was asked to speak. She was also, like kind of a backup. It was like a last minute. It was a last minute thing that she even got to speak there. So like, this is an issue within the movement, and like, why are they not focusing on other people? Why are they just focusing on themselves?
And they don't realize that women, specifically white women, ignore their privilege that could in turn result in like the aiding of women of color.
Right. Or if not, they just try to take advantage to like the privileges they have to the max.
Requires, which I think is another theme throughout this section, that women of color are often asked to educate the oppressors, to white women, to white people in general, about their own culture, and they're often asked to speak for the whole group. So in But I Know You, American Woman, so Moscovich is a Latina Jewish American woman, and she expresses her frustration with always having to explain or kind of defend her own culture. And she says that the ignorance that is related around it is the lack of kind of desire to educate their own selves, like lack of knowledge that it is. And she says that often creates a foundation for cultural oppression, which we know is like a cycle, continues as ignorance continues. So one of the quotes that I thought was really important was, "How can someone feel guilt about screwing over someone or some country she knows nothing about?" That kind of relates into the view of essentialism. Often white people, white women, they have an essentialized or romanticized view of the global south, third world countries, that they kind of only want to retain information that has to do with those people living in those countries being happy. So like photos we see in textbooks growing up, like they never show us the kind of gritty situations that often like the poverty and the struggle that women in those countries have to go through specifically, which is also created by globalization. That again, it's just a cycle of lack of knowledge and how it creates this oppression and kind of building a wall that you don't have a desire to learn about other people's culture.
Negative images. So you're only getting one or the other. Because Audre Lorde also, she wrote an open letter to Mary Daly about Mary Daly's book, Gin and Ecology, and how she only mentioned genital mutilation in the African culture. And Lord appreciated that she spoke about that because that's something that is like lacking in research and that you don't hear a lot about. But there was nothing else mentioned of the African culture, nothing positive put in there that could give kind of a round scope of everything. It's showing like it's kind of dismissing that part of African culture where you have these like powerful deities that are women that have this positive effect on people's daily lives and they're worshipped, and you're only showing this like kind of horrific part of the culture to that. And then that was the only part in the book that addressed anything like that.
And what made it even more problematic was that Mary Daly used Audre Lorde's own words against her, kind of. So this also kind of relates with Moscovich, she often becomes women often become defensive when their culture is attacked. But even when they do kind of agree that there are problematic situations in certain aspects of their culture, again, pick and choosing, white people often take certain parts of what a woman says and kind of blows it up out of proportion. So her main issue is that her words were kind of put into the section without any type of context of what she was writing in her own article. So she was upset that she was portrayed negatively. And this also kind of relates with a video on Twitter that I found. So there's this woman named Hoda Kotebi. She's an Irani fashion blogger based in Chicago. And recently, I think it was a week or two ago, she was brought on WGN News in Chicago. And a white man and a white woman were interviewing her and kind of asking her questions originally about her website, about Muslim fashion, stuff like that. Then they completely switched the topic almost right after the end of her response about what she thinks about Iran and its nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
She created an extremely thoughtful response saying that although there are some aspects of that country that do have bad connotations, those impacts or those facts about that culture was created through imperialism, through colonialism, through the wars that America perpetuates. And she was basically called out by the white woman who was interviewing her that she doesn't sound American,
right?
Because she's pointing out both sides of.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it's you're gonna accuse her of not sounding American when she's lived most of her life in America, but then you expect her to speak on a country where she doesn't even live in anymore.
Yeah. Right, and
she's not even there to talk about that.
Yeah, and that goes to people expecting women of color to separate their politics and the country that they're from and their identity when they're one and the same. And you can be American and you can also have a cultural past as well. And so for that woman to point
out to know the culture of both of those countries she's from.
Yeah,
which kind of shows white feminism and how it is inherently racist. How white women tend to only have a positive view or patriotism to a country that is mainly white, that is white controlled, white ruled, and anything else is kind of bad, even though you basically cause all those situations, domestic situations that go on in other countries. It's ignorance and lack of knowledge of your own history.
That man,
she knew was coming.
But then,
right.
I also don't agree with the rhetoric that women of color are supposed to know.
Yeah,
it goes back to the oppressors. The oppressed educating the oppressors.
Mm-hmm.
We can't expect women of color to always have the answers.
Which is confusing.
But then,
because if we're asked questions, we're expected to give answers and answers that they would like. But when we have opinions, we can't have those opinions because as a different origin country or as not being a white person, you are not entitled to have opinions on an American issue kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that goes to African American women having to curb their opinions because otherwise they're seen as aggressors to white women. And so, what are some ways that you think that, this racism within the movement can be stopped or helped or resisted somehow?
Well, pretty much the circling theme of this section is that it's important for people to educate themselves about topics and about people's cultures because it's pretty unavoidable to not encounter in general.
Yeah, but schooling system, and
Yeah.
that's probably like agree that people need to educate themselves. We have so much access to the internet. If you're depending on what class you are here, and so we need to be able to.
There's no excuse.
There's no excuse. If you
Yeah.
don't know, look it up, and be
It's not
socially
that hard.
conscious.
Like everything's online.
Be socially conscious. Also, these feminist organizations need to tailor their needs to the people that are within them instead of being like, oh, we don't deal with that issue because we have all these others that
We
pertain
tend
to,
to ignore them.
that just pertain to us. So that's another thing.
And that also kind of contributes to the negative image that feminism has, where it's kind of this white feminism that we talked about in class actually, like the whole bra burning, not shaving your legs type of shit. Like, that kind of narrative is too
Broad.
too broad, and it's like too much ahead of like everything else, like the real issues that lie behind it. So I think it's like trying to reconstruct, or like the definition of feminism doesn't need to be reconstructed, but like the way that people perceive it to be, which I think is a challenge. But
It's very negligent.
Yeah, because it gained traction with white feminism, but now we need to like take a step back, see how every other type of
Right.
woman, and other is oppressed, and to take that into consideration and to, advocate for those needs.
Yeah, even in early media, like in the 1960s, Black women were often portrayed as like domestics, where white women were like the housewife that was perfect with like the big dresses and the tiny waist, and like women of color were like even their beauty standards, were different, and they were highlighted as more masculine and less like beautiful.
And like they said in class, they weren't really like free to express what gender they really felt they were, because they were expected to be like woman wise like all the time.
Right, but you don't hear about that as much because all the main scholarship has focused on these middle-class white women. So there definitely needs more intersectionality.
Which I also think is important, since we know for a fact that white people in general are heard better in this world, that white people do educate themselves and push an agenda that kind of puts out the voices of women of color or people of color in general. I think that's more beneficial to the feminist movement as a whole.
But
Like in order to eradicate racism, white people are the ones that need to take the initiative.
Yeah, introspective thought needs to be done.
Definitely.
And also with the idea of intersectionality, a lot of people, like, I think it's important to address that feminism in general has so many different layers and levels to it. Like, it's not only even just a general definition of feminism, that there's so many divisions between like white women and women of color, and even between different types of women of color, and like even like economic statuses. So I think it's important to again be knowledgeable about all of these aspects of feminism, so that people are more behind the movement.
Right. I think white feminism started, and it was eradicated, and it stayed solely white women because women of color were so busy, like working, and like they had other issues, and like when they first started, feminism wasn't important to them as much as like surviving. So I think it's important to like think about that.
Yeah, it brings in the aspect of class, like, do they have the time to be able to advocate for policies for, their own rights, when they have to like provide for their family. They have to work all day, every day because they weren't born into a higher class. They were born into a working class. So yeah, it's something to take into account.
So, in conclusion, the overarching themes of our section called "And When You Leave, Take Your Pictures With You," we believe is firstly about what white feminism is and how it is inherently racist.
Yeah, how women of color, they're seen as tokens and as the ones that need to educate.
Yeah, and like expecting the oppressed to educate the oppressors, like the essentialized view of.
And also like having to speak for the whole group.
And also the myth that women of color are not political.
Yeah.
So, and then I think we all came to the conclusion that the ways to help resist this is that people that aren't of color need to educate themselves. They
Yeah.
need to take that initiative to know about other cultures and to be socially aware. And that's a step that can be taken to end this racism and this, just ignorance.
Right, which is the overarching theme of the whole section, I feel.
Right.
That's what I thought.
I think that was like a